What if the oldest, dirtiest penny in your home is hiding a story that almost nobody knows? Welcome back to Change Your Life. Today, we're uncovering 4 Lincoln Wheat Pennies that have fascinated collectors for decades. 1944 D Wheat Penny, 1952 D Wheat Penny, 1955 Wheat Penny, no mint mark, 1946 Wheat Penny, no mint mark. To most people, they're nothing more than old, worn pennies. They're scratched, faded, and covered with decades of circulation. But that's exactly why they're so often overlooked. Behind these tiny copper coins are stories of wartime production, minting mysteries, unexpected varieties, and hidden details that can transform an ordinary-looking penny into a collector's prize. In this documentary, we'll examine each coin one by one, uncover the history behind its creation, reveal the details serious collectors search for, and expose the surprising mistakes and varieties that many people never notice. And here's the part you won't want to miss. The final coin in today's countdown has a history that surprises even experienced collectors, and most people have no idea why. So before you throw another old wheat penny into a jar or spend it without a second glance, stay with me until the very end. Because the coin you've ignored for years might have been the most interesting one all along. Now, let's reveal coin number 1. The retired machinist almost threw the coffee can away. It had been sitting untouched on a dusty shelf in his garage outside Denver for decades, hidden behind rusted paint cans, bent screwdrivers, and faded holiday decorations nobody remembered buying. When he finally reached for it during a spring cleanup, the lid resisted before giving way with a dry metallic pop. Inside, hundreds of old coins slid against one another with the unmistakable sound only aged copper can produce. Most were ordinary. Some were badly worn. A few still carried traces of their original color. Then one small penny rolled onto the workbench and stopped beneath the afternoon sunlight. The date read 1944. A tiny D rested beneath it. He almost ignored it. After all, millions of 1944 D Lincoln Wheat Pennies were produced. Finding one was not unusual. Most examples remain common today, especially in circulated condition. Yet experienced collectors know something that casual observers often miss. Sometimes the story hiding inside a common coin is far more fascinating than the value attached to it. And there is one detail about certain 1944 D Lincoln Wheat Pennies that continues to spark excitement among collectors decades after they left the mint. We will uncover that mystery soon. But first, we need to travel back to the America that created this coin. The year was 1944. The world was still at war. Factories worked around the clock. Freight trains crossed the country carrying steel, fuel, food, and military equipment. Families gathered around their radios every evening waiting for updates from Europe and the Pacific. Every letter arriving from overseas carried hope, and sometimes heartbreak. America had become an industrial giant. Every machine mattered. Every worker mattered. Even the smallest coin carried unexpected importance. Pennies bought newspapers. Pennies helped pay bus fares. Pennies filled glass jars on kitchen shelves where children saved for toys they dreamed of owning after the war ended. Money moved constantly. The United States Mint moved just as quickly. Inside the Denver Mint, production never slowed for long. Before sunrise, workers entered enormous halls filled with towering presses, conveyor systems, and the constant smell of warm lubricating oil mixed with freshly struck metal. Blank copper alloy planchets traveled through machines with remarkable precision. Every few seconds another press descended with incredible force, transforming a smooth metal disc into a Lincoln Wheat Penny. Strike. Release. Advance. Strike again. The rhythm never stopped. No employee paused beside the press and whispered, "Collectors will study this one 80 years from now." To them, it was another day at work. To history, it was another page being written. Unlike the steel cents produced in 1943, the 1944 D Lincoln Wheat Penny marked America's return to a copper-based alloy for regular production. That change alone makes the year unforgettable. The familiar warm reddish color returned to the nation's pocket change, and millions of Americans barely noticed the transition as pennies continued passing through stores, post offices, train stations, and neighborhood markets. Yet hidden inside that ordinary production story lies one of the greatest mysteries in American numismatics. Not every 1944 penny was struck exactly as intended. We'll come back to that. For now, hold the coin in your imagination. Feel its size, its simplicity, its quiet weight. The obverse displays Abraham Lincoln facing right, just as he had since 1909. The word liberty stands to one side. In God We Trust curves above his portrait. Below rests the date 1944, accompanied by the small d mint mark identifying Denver as the place of birth. Turn the coin over. Two wheat stalks frame the words 1 cent, surrounding the country name and the Latin phrase e pluribus unum. The design feels familiar because generations of Americans carried it every day. It became part of ordinary life. That ordinary appearance is exactly what makes careful examination so important. Before searching for anything unusual, never clean the coin. Not with water. Not with polish. Not with baking soda. Not with anything. Cleaning permanently alters original surfaces and often reduces collector appeal instead of improving it. Professional graders immediately recognize clean coins, and once those original surfaces disappear, they cannot be restored. Instead, hold the coin only by its edges. Place it beneath a single light source positioned at a low angle. As the light slowly moves across the surface, tiny details begin appearing that overhead lighting often hides. Now bring out a 10x loop. This inexpensive tool becomes one of the collector's greatest allies. Study Lincoln's portrait carefully. Examine every letter. Inspect the date. Then focus on the tiny D mint mark. Take your time. Coins reward patience. At first glance, everything may appear perfectly ordinary. Then small details begin revealing themselves. Fine die polish lines. Tiny contact marks from decades of circulation. Minute differences in strike strength. Every mark tells part of the coin's journey. There is another simple test every collector should perform. Check the edge. A normal 1944 D Lincoln Wheat penny should display the familiar copper appearance around its edge. If something looks dramatically different, do not jump to conclusions. Investigate carefully. Because one of the most famous stories connected to the 1944 penny begins with the edge. Most people have heard rumors about valuable 1943 steel cents. Far fewer understand why certain 1944 pennies became legendary. The explanation is extraordinary. During the transition from 1943 steel cents back to copper alloy production, a very small number of leftover steel planchets are believed to have remained inside minting equipment. When those forgotten blanks accidentally received the 1944 design, they created one of the rarest and most famous mint errors in American history. Documented examples are extraordinarily rare. Historical auction records suggest authenticated specimens have attracted remarkable collector interest because they combine a famous transitional error with genuine scarcity. But here is the important truth. The overwhelming majority of 1944 D Lincoln Wheat pennies are not struck on steel. Most are ordinary copper alloy cents. That is why careful examination matters more than excitement. If you ever believe you have discovered an unusual example, begin with the simplest test: use a reliable digital scale. A normal copper alloy 1944 D wheat penny should weigh approximately 3.11 grams within normal mint tolerances. A genuine steel example weighs significantly less. That small difference has changed the lives of more than one careful collector. But weight alone never proves authenticity. Professional certification is required before any value can be assigned. That single sentence protects collectors from expensive mistakes. Many altered coins circulate online. Some have been plated. Some have been modified. Some are simply misunderstood. Knowledge always comes before value. And there is another feature on the 1944 D Lincoln Wheat penny that even experienced collectors sometimes overlook. It has nothing to do with steel. Nothing to do with color. Nothing to do with the date itself. It begins with the dies that struck the coin. And understanding those dies will completely change the way you look at every wheat penny that follows. Part 1b, 1944 D Lincoln Wheat Penny. Every working die has a lifespan. It begins almost perfect. Freshly prepared, hardened steel carries every detail of Victor David Brenner's famous design with remarkable sharpness. Lincoln's coat appears crisp. The lettering is bold. The wheat ears show strong, clean lines stretching from top to bottom. Then production begins. 1 strike. 100 strikes. 1,000. 10,000. The dies absorb tremendous pressure every second they remain inside the coining press. Steel is incredibly durable, but it is not indestructible. As production continues, tiny changes begin appearing, changes invisible to the workers operating the machinery but obvious to trained collectors decades later. That is why two genuine 1944 D Lincoln Wheat Pennies can look surprisingly different even though they were struck during the same year. One may display razor-sharp details. Another may show slightly softer lettering. Neither is automatically rare. Neither is automatically damaged. They simply represent different moments in the life of the dies. That realization changes everything. Because collecting is not simply about finding rare coins. It is about learning to read history written in metal. Now imagine placing 5 different 1944 D wheat pennies side by side beneath a lamp. At first, they appear identical. Then the differences slowly emerge. One has brighter original color. Another carries deep chocolate brown surfaces earned through decades of circulation. A third still flashes traces of original mint luster when the light moves across Lincoln's portrait. A fourth reveals a tiny raised line near the lettering. The fifth looks completely ordinary. Or does it? Experienced collectors never assume. They compare. They observe. They ask questions. That habit often leads to the most rewarding discoveries. Now examine the date and the word liberty carefully with your 10x loupe. Sometimes beginners become excited after seeing what appears to be doubled lettering. But appearances can be deceiving. Machine doubling is one of the most misunderstood striking effects in modern collecting. It happens when slight movement occurs during the striking process, creating flat, shelf-like doubling on parts of the design. Although interesting, it generally carries little collector premium. A true doubled die obverse, however, tells a completely different story. It begins long before the coin is struck. The doubling is created during the hubbing process while the die itself is being made. Every coin struck from that die repeats the same doubled design. Properly authenticated examples receive far greater collector attention because they represent a genuine die variety rather than a striking disturbance. Learning the difference requires patience, not luck. Now shift your attention to the rim. A complete rim usually indicates that the striking collar functioned correctly during production. If part of the design is noticeably missing because the blank was not perfectly centered beneath the dies, the coin may be an off-center strike. Historical auction records suggest that authenticated off-center errors showing a visible date generally attract stronger collector interest than minor examples. Another fascinating possibility is the Broadstruck error. Normally the collar surrounds the planchet during striking, creating the coin's finished diameter and raised rim. If that collar fails, the metal spreads farther outward than intended, producing a noticeably different appearance. Collectors enjoy Broadstruck coins because the error is immediately visible without advanced equipment. Then come die cracks. As the working dies age under tremendous pressure, microscopic fractures sometimes develop within the steel. During striking, metal flows into those tiny openings, creating raised lines on the finished coin. Some cracks are barely visible. Others stretch boldly across the design. Each one records another chapter in the life of the die that produced it. Perhaps the rarest possibility remains the wrong planchet error. Imagine a 1944 D Lincoln Wheat Penny accidentally struck on a blank intended for an entirely different denomination. Documented examples exist for various U.S. coins, although they remain exceptionally rare. Historical auction records suggest authenticated wrong Planchet errors often become highlights of advanced collections because of their unmistakable appearance and genuine scarcity. But there is an important warning every responsible collector should remember. Never assume. Professional certification is required before any value can be assigned. That rule protects both buyers and sellers. The most respected grading services remain PCGS and NGC. Their authentication provides confidence that raw, uncertified coins simply cannot offer. Raw coins carry no reliable premium based only on hopeful claims. Evidence always comes first. Now let us talk about condition. Condition often matters more than the date itself. Most 1944 Lincoln Wheat Pennies entered circulation immediately after leaving the Denver Mint. They passed through grocery stores, train stations, post offices, family businesses, and children's piggy banks. Every exchange left another tiny mark. Every pocket rubbed the surfaces. Every cash drawer added another contact scratch. That is why beautifully preserved examples become increasingly difficult to find today. Collectors pay close attention to certified grades such as MS65, MS66, MS67, and the exceptionally scarce MS68. At those levels, original luster, sharp strike quality, minimal contact marks, and outstanding eye appeal become critically important. Historical auction records suggest premium certified examples often attract significantly greater collector interest than ordinary circulated pieces. Documented sales have shown that originality frequently matters more than simple age. Values fluctuate with market conditions. No honest collector can promise future prices. The market changes. Demand changes. But history never changes. That is what makes the 1944 Lincoln Wheat Penny so fascinating. It survived wartime America. It survived changing generations. It survived decades of circulation before finding its way into collections around the world. Some remain tucked inside old albums. Others rest quietly in forgotten jars. A few still appear in inherited collections where families have no idea what stories those small copper coins have witnessed. Perhaps the greatest reward is not discovering a fortune. Perhaps it is discovering a connection. A connection to the factory worker who earned this penny after a long shift. To the child who dropped it into a savings bank. To the soldier who carried it home after the war. That tiny coin passed through countless hands before reaching yours. And as one chapter quietly closes, another begins. Because the next wheat penny comes from a very different America. The war was over. The nation was changing. Automobiles filled new highways. Television entered living rooms. And inside the Denver Mint, another ordinary penny was about to begin an extraordinary journey. The date on that next coin reads 1952 D. The year was 1952. America no longer sounded like a nation at war. It sounded like progress. Automobile engines filled expanding highways. New suburbs stretched beyond city limits. Families gathered around black and white television sets after dinner. Baseball games played over the radio. Corner diners stayed busy late into the evening, and a single penny could still buy something the children actually wanted. Yet while America looked toward the future, millions of tiny pieces of history continued leaving the Denver Mint every single day. One of them carried a small D beneath the date. Today we know it as the 1952 Lincoln Wheat Penny. At first glance, it appears almost ordinary. That assumption has fooled collectors for generations. Because one of the greatest lessons in coin collecting is this: common does not mean uninteresting. The production floor inside the Denver Mint never paused to celebrate another Lincoln cent. The massive presses continued their relentless rhythm. Blank planchets rolled across steel tracks. Operators checked gauges. Inspectors removed sample coins for examination. The smell of machine oil mixed with warm metal filled the building as every thunderous strike echoed through the press room. Strike. Release. Advance. Strike again. Thousands of pennies were born every hour. No one stopped to ask which coin would survive untouched for the next 70 years. History rarely announces itself. It simply happens. The Lincoln Wheat Penny had already become one of America's most familiar coins. Since 1909, Abraham Lincoln's portrait had watched generations of Americans experience wars, celebrations, economic hardship, and prosperity. The design remained unchanged. But every year told a different story. The 1952 D penny belonged to an America filled with confidence. Factories that had once built wartime equipment now produced household appliances, automobiles, and everyday goods. Small businesses flourished. Schools expanded. Neighborhoods grew. Pennies flowed through every part of that growing economy. A newspaper boy might have received one while delivering the morning edition. A grocery clerk might have dropped one into a cash drawer before lunch. A child might have slipped one into a blue ceramic piggy bank after buying a piece of bubble gum. None of them imagined that collectors decades later would study that same coin beneath magnification. That is the magic of numismatics. Ordinary money becomes extraordinary history. Now place a 1952 D Lincoln Wheat Penny beneath a single low-angle light. Do not rush. Hold it only by the edges. Allow the light to travel slowly across Lincoln's portrait. Notice how the highest points catch the reflection first. Then bring out your 10x loop. Study the date carefully. Inspect the tiny D mint mark. Move slowly through every letter of liberty and in God we trust. The reverse deserves equal attention. The wheat ears should appear balanced and well-defined, framing the bold words 1 cent. Tiny differences begin appearing the longer you observe. Minute contact marks. Fine die polish lines. Subtle changes in strike strength. Every detail records another moment in the coin's life. There is one feature on certain 1952 D Lincoln Wheat Pennies that experienced collectors never ignore. We will reveal it shortly. First, you need to understand how these coins were actually made. Every Lincoln cent began as a smooth metal blank. That blank traveled through powerful presses where two hardened steel dies struck the design into the surface with tremendous force. The pressure lasted only a fraction of a second. Yet it permanently shaped the coin. When everything worked perfectly, another ordinary penny continued toward counting machines and storage bags. But perfection has always been difficult to maintain. Every working die slowly changes. Every machine vibrates. Every adjustment leaves evidence. Those tiny differences became today's collecting opportunities. Now examine Lincoln's hair above his ear. Does every strand appear sharp? Look closely at the bow tie. Study the lettering around the rim. Collectors often discover that patience reveals details impossible to notice with the naked eye. Sometimes those details are perfectly normal. Sometimes they are not. One of the first things specialists look for is evidence of a genuine doubled die obverse. This variety begins during the creation of the working die itself. Because the doubling exists on the die, every coin struck from it repeats the same characteristics. Machine doubling can appear similar at first glance. But the difference is significant. Machine doubling usually produces flat, shelf-like images caused during the strike itself and generally carries little collector premium. Understanding that distinction prevents costly mistakes. Now rotate the coin by flipping it on its vertical axis. The reverse should align correctly with the obverse. If it appears noticeably rotated, further examination may be worthwhile because genuine rotational die errors occasionally escaped mint quality control. Most coins pass this test. A very small number do not. Those are the discoveries that keep collectors searching through old rolls year after year. There is another simple examination every collector should perform. Inspect the edge. A normal 1952 D wheat penny should display its expected copper alloy appearance around the edge. Anything dramatically unusual deserves careful investigation. Not celebration. Investigation. Because altered coins exist. Counterfeits exist. Misidentified coins exist. Knowledge remains the collector's greatest protection. As the light continues moving across the surface, another possibility begins revealing itself. Tiny raised lines. Barely visible. Easy to overlook. Those lines may tell the story of an aging die nearing the end of its service life. And understanding those lines changes everything about the way experienced collectors examine the 1952 D Lincoln Wheat Penny. Those tiny raised lines are not scratches. They are history. Every working die inside the Denver Mint had a beginning and an ending. When a fresh die first entered production, every detail appeared remarkably sharp. Lincoln's portrait stood proudly above smooth fields. The lettering looked crisp. The wheat ears displayed bold parallel lines that reflected light beautifully. Then the striking continued. Hour after hour. Day after day. Thousands of planchets became pennies beneath the same pair of dies. Eventually, microscopic fatigue began forming inside the hardened steel. Small fractures appeared. Those fractures became what collectors now call die cracks. Unlike damage that occurs after a coin leaves the mint, die cracks are created during the minting process itself. When metal flows into those tiny openings under enormous pressure, it leaves raised lines on the finished coin. Some are almost invisible. Others stretch dramatically across the design. Everyone tells the story of a die that continued working just a little longer. Collectors love those stories. Now compare two different 1952 D Lincoln Wheat Pennies under the same light. One may appear bright with strong original luster. Another may be dark brown after decades of honest circulation. A third may display beautiful natural chocolate toning. All three are genuine. All three have different journeys. That is why experienced collectors never judge a coin by color alone. Originality matters. Patience matters. Knowledge matters even more. Now move your attention to the rim. If the rim appears complete and evenly formed, the retaining collar performed its job correctly during striking. If part of the design is missing because the blank shifted before the strike, you may have discovered an off-center strike. Historical auction records suggest authenticated off-center Lincoln cents with a visible date generally receive stronger collector interest than minor examples. The more dramatic the genuine error, the greater the attention it often receives. Values fluctuate with market conditions. No outcome is ever guaranteed. Another fascinating mint error is the Broadstruck. Normally, the retaining collar surrounds the blank while it is struck, giving the coin its finished diameter and raised rim. If that collar fails to contain the blank properly, the metal spreads outward during the strike. The result is immediately noticeable when compared with a normal cent. Broadstruck coins remain popular because the error is easy to recognize. Then comes the rarest possibility. The wrong Planchet error. Imagine a Lincoln Wheat Penny accidentally struck on a blank intended for another denomination. It sounds impossible. Yet documented examples prove that mistakes like this have occurred throughout U.S. mint history. They remain exceptionally rare. Documented sales have shown authenticated wrong Planchet errors often become centerpieces of advanced collections because of their rarity and unmistakable appearance. But excitement should never replace evidence. Professional certification is required before any value can be assigned. That sentence protects collectors every single day. Many altered coins are advertised online as spectacular mint errors. Most are not genuine. That is why respected collectors rely on PCGS and NGC for authentication and grading. Raw, ungraded coins carry no reliable premium simply because someone believes they are rare. Facts always come before hope. Now let us talk about condition. Condition is where the 1952 D Lincoln Wheat Penny becomes truly interesting. Millions were struck. Most entered circulation almost immediately. They traveled through grocery stores, gas stations, hardware stores, and neighborhood banks. Each transaction added another tiny mark. Each year reduced the number of pristine survivors. That is why exceptional mint state examples attract so much attention today. Collectors carefully study coins certified as MS65, MS66, MS67, and the elusive MS68. Those grades represent outstanding preservation, strong original luster, minimal contact marks, and exceptional eye appeal. Historical auction records suggest premium certified examples often receive significantly greater collector interest than average circulated pieces. Documented sales have shown that originality frequently matters more than age alone. Values fluctuate with market conditions. No responsible expert promises guaranteed future prices. The market changes. History does not. That is why the 1952 D Lincoln Wheat Penny continues inspiring collectors more than 70 years after it was struck. Not because every example is rare. Most are not. But because every surviving coin witnessed an America that no longer exists. An America where milk was delivered to front doors. Where children raced bicycles through quiet neighborhoods. Where pennies still carried real buying power. Every coin became a silent witness. Perhaps one rested inside a soldier's pocket after returning home. Perhaps another paid for a comic book. Perhaps another disappeared into a family savings jar and remained forgotten for half a century. No grading service can identify those journeys. Only the coin remembers. Margaret gently placed the 1952 D Wheat Penny beside the earlier 1944 D cent. They looked similar. But they belonged to completely different chapters of American history. She reached back into the old coffee can one more time. Another Lincoln Wheat Penny rolled into her hand. This one needed no mint mark beneath the date. Only 4 numbers. 1955. And hidden inside that ordinary-looking penny was one of the most famous stories ever told in American coin collecting. The coin you are about to examine has fascinated collectors for generations. Not because it is made of gold. Not because it is the oldest Lincoln cent. And not because every example is worth a fortune. It became legendary because one tiny mistake transformed an ordinary penny into one of the most recognizable error coins in American history. The remarkable part? At first glance, it still looks like an ordinary Lincoln Wheat Penny. That is exactly why the story of the 1955 no-mint mark Lincoln Wheat Penny continues to capture imaginations nearly 3/4 of a century later. Before we reveal that famous mistake, step back into America. It is 1955. The country is changing faster than almost anyone imagined possible. Television antennas rise above rooftops across suburban neighborhoods. Bright chrome automobiles fill newly expanded highways. Rock and roll begins changing American music forever. Families gather around kitchen tables where newspapers carry headlines about science, politics, and a rapidly modernizing nation. The economy is booming. Businesses are growing. Cash registers never seem to stop ringing. And somewhere inside those registers, Lincoln Wheat Pennies quietly move from one hand to another. Nobody pauses to admire them. Nobody imagines history is already hiding in their pockets. Inside the Philadelphia Mint, another ordinary production day begins before sunrise. Massive coining presses stand ready. Blank planchets move along mechanical conveyors with remarkable precision. The smell of warm steel, machine oil, and freshly struck bronze fills the enormous production floor. Inspectors check samples. Operators monitor every machine. Each thunderous strike lasts less than a second. Yet that single instant creates something designed to survive generations. Strike. Release. Advance. Strike again. The rhythm becomes almost hypnotic. Thousands of cents leave the presses every hour. To the workers, another routine shift. To collectors decades later, one of the most important production years in Lincoln cent history. The 1955 Lincoln Wheat Penny carries no mint mark because it was struck in Philadelphia. The obverse features Abraham Lincoln facing right beneath the words "In God We Trust," while liberty stands proudly to the left of his portrait. Turn the coin over. 2 elegant wheat ears frame 1 cent, surrounded by United States of America and E pluribus unum. Simple. Balanced. Timeless. That familiar appearance is exactly what makes careful examinations so important. Because one particular variety changed everything collectors believed about modern pennies. We will uncover it shortly. But first, Learn how professionals examine the coin. Hold it only by its edges. Even clean fingers leave natural oils behind. Place the penny beneath a single light source positioned at a low angle. Do not use harsh overhead lighting. Let the shadows move naturally across Lincoln's face. Immediately, tiny details become visible. Fine contact marks. Original mint luster. Minute die polish lines. Now reach for your 10x loop. This simple magnifier allows your eyes to see details impossible to notice otherwise. Study the date. Examine every letter in Liberty. Inspect in God we trust one letter at a time. Then move to the reverse. Carefully observe 1 cent. The wheat ears. Every letter. Every line. Most people look for only a few seconds. Collectors look until the coin begins revealing its story. There is another quick test. Flip the coin on its vertical axis. The reverse should align correctly with the obverse. If it appears noticeably rotated, further examination may be worthwhile because genuine rotational die errors occasionally escaped mint quality control. Most examples align perfectly. A very small number do not. Those small differences often become the biggest discoveries. Now comes the mystery. Collectors around the world search for one specific feature on certain 1955 Lincoln Wheat Pennies. Not discoloration. Not scratches. Not cleaning. A manufacturing mistake. One created before the coin was ever struck. Known today as the famous 1955 double die obverse, it remains one of the most celebrated die varieties in American numismatic history. Unlike machine doubling, which occurs during striking and usually creates flat, shelf-like images with little collector premium, a genuine double die obverse begins much earlier. It forms during the creation of the working die itself. Because the doubling exists on the die, every coin struck from that die repeats the same characteristics. That distinction changes everything. Historical auction records suggest authenticated examples of the famous 1955 double die have attracted extraordinary collector interest for decades. Documented sales have shown exceptional certified specimens remain among the most sought-after Lincoln cents ever produced. But honesty matters. Most 1955 no-mint mark wheat pennies are not the famous double die variety. The overwhelming majority are ordinary business strikes. That truth builds trust. Never assume a doubled appearance automatically means you have discovered the legendary variety. Many beginners mistake machine doubling for the real thing. That mistake happens every year. Knowledge prevents disappointment. And there is another characteristic experienced specialists inspect before reaching any conclusion. It has nothing to do with doubling. Nothing to do with wear. Nothing to do with the mint mark. It begins with the dies themselves. Because every working die leaves fingerprints that only patient collectors ever learn to recognize. Every legendary coin begins the same way. As an ordinary coin. No worker inside the Philadelphia Mint realized that one particular die would become famous around the world. The operators kept the presses running. Inspectors checked production samples. Bags of freshly struck cents continued filling one after another. Nothing looked unusual from across the room. History was hiding in plain sight. That is one reason the famous 1955 double die obverse remains so captivating. It was never created on purpose. It was simply one of those rare moments when the die-making process produced something unexpected. When that double die entered service, every cent struck from it carried the same bold doubling. The effect is especially noticeable on the date, Liberty, and in God We Trust, where the letters appear clearly separated instead of showing the flat, shelf-like appearance associated with machine doubling. The war was over. For the first time in years, America woke to mornings that were no longer dominated by battlefield headlines. Train stations still welcomed returning servicemen. Factory whistles still echoed across industrial cities. But the machines that had once produced tanks, aircraft parts, and ammunition were slowly being transformed to build automobiles, refrigerators, and the products of everyday life. The nation was learning how to live in peace again. And quietly, almost unnoticed, another Lincoln Wheat penny entered history. The date was 1946. No mint mark. Struck in Philadelphia. Most Americans never looked twice at it. They spent it. Saved it. Dropped it into vending machines. Left it beneath sofa cushions. Yet every one of those ordinary pennies became a silent witness to one of the most important turning points in American history. That is what makes the 1946 Lincoln Wheat penny so fascinating. It is not simply a coin. It is one of the first small pieces of money produced for a country trying to rebuild everyday life after years of sacrifice. Inside the Philadelphia Mint, the atmosphere felt different from only a few years earlier. The urgency of wartime production had faded. The presses still thundered. The conveyor belts still carried endless streams of planchets. Inspectors still examined freshly struck coins beneath bright lights. But there was something else in the air. Relief. Hope. Possibility. Every strike of the press sounded familiar. Yet the future it represented was completely new. Strike. Release. Advance. Strike again. Thousands of Lincoln Wheat pennies emerged every hour, each carrying Abraham Lincoln's portrait, a reminder of another difficult chapter America had overcome generations before. No employee paused to admire them. No supervisor predicted that collectors nearly a century later would examine these coins under magnification. History rarely announces itself. It quietly passes from one hand to another. The 1946 Lincoln Wheat penny looks almost identical to the years surrounding it. Lincoln's portrait dominates the obverse. "In God we trust" curves above his head. Liberty stands proudly to the left. The date 1946 appears below. No mint mark confirms that the coin was struck in Philadelphia. Turn it over. Two graceful wheat ears frame 1 cent, while United States of America and E pluribus unum complete one of the most recognizable reverse designs ever placed on an American coin. Simple. Balanced. Timeless. But collectors know appearances can be deceiving. Even ordinary-looking coins deserve extraordinary attention. Begin your examination the same way professionals do. Hold the penny only by its edges. Avoid touching the surfaces. Place it beneath a single low-angle light source. Watch how the reflection moves across Lincoln's portrait. Now bring out your 10x loupe. Study the date. Inspect every letter of liberty. Move carefully through "In God we trust." Turn the coin over and examine the wheat ears one line at a time. Do not hurry. Most discoveries belong to people who slow down. At first everything may appear perfectly normal. Then subtle clues begin emerging. Minute die polish lines. Tiny contact marks. Differences in strike sharpness. Every surface tells part of the story. There is one detail on certain 1946 Philadelphia cents that experienced collectors never ignore. We will come to it shortly. Before searching for valuable varieties, learn to recognize what an ordinary coin looks like. That single habit prevents countless mistakes. Many beginners become excited after seeing what appears to be doubling. Look carefully. Not every doubled appearance is important. Machine doubling occurs during the strike itself and usually creates flat, shelf-like images with little collector premium. A genuine doubled die obverse, however, begins during the creation of the working die. Because the doubling exists on the die itself, every coin struck from that die repeats the same characteristics. The distinction is critical. Collectors who understand the difference avoid years of confusion. Now rotate the coin by flipping it on its vertical axis. The reverse should align correctly with the obverse. If it appears noticeably rotated, further examination may be worthwhile because genuine rotational die errors occasionally escaped quality control despite the mint's careful inspection process. Most examples align perfectly. A few surprise everyone. Now inspect the rim. A complete, evenly formed rim usually confirms that the retaining collar functioned correctly during striking. If part of the design appears missing because the blank shifted before the strike, you may have discovered an off-center strike. Historical auction records suggest authenticated off-center examples with clearly visible dates often receive stronger collector interest than minor shifts. Another dramatic possibility is the Broadstruck error. Without the retaining collar surrounding the planchet, the metal expands farther than intended during striking. The finished coin immediately stands apart from an ordinary cent. Then there are die cracks. Tiny fractures slowly develop inside aging working dies after thousands upon thousands of strikes. When fresh planchets are struck, metal fills those microscopic openings, leaving thin raised lines across the finished coin. Some remain almost invisible. Others become bold enough to catch the light immediately. Each one records another chapter in the life of the die that created it. There is still one mystery surrounding the 1946 Philadelphia wheat penny that many collectors overlook. It is not hidden in the date. It is not hidden in the mint mark. It is hidden in something far more important: the condition of survival. Because the story of this coin is not simply about how it was made. It is about how it managed to survive nearly 80 years before finding its way into your hands. Survival is the rarest part of any coin story. The Philadelphia Mint struck millions of 1946 Lincoln Wheat Pennies. At the moment they left the presses, they looked nearly identical. Their surfaces glowed with fresh mint luster. Every line of Lincoln's portrait appeared crisp. The wheat ears stood sharp and bold against smooth fields. Then real life began. One penny disappeared into a grocery store cash register before lunchtime. Another crossed the counter of a neighborhood bakery. A third rode in the pocket of a young boy who had spent the afternoon delivering newspapers. Thousands vanished into circulation before the ink on that week's newspapers had even dried. Every transaction changed them. Every pocket left tiny marks. Every year reduced the number of untouched survivors. That is why preservation matters so much. The coin itself may be common. Its condition may not be. Imagine two 1946 Philadelphia wheat pennies lying side by side today. Both are genuine. Both were struck in the same year. Yet one has spent decades in circulation, its highest details softened by countless exchanges. Lincoln's cheek shows wear. The wheat ears have lost much of their original definition. The surfaces display the honest evidence of a lifetime in commerce. The second coin tells a different story. Perhaps it was placed inside a paper roll at a local bank in 1946. Perhaps a collector tucked it into an album before it ever reached circulation. Perhaps it remained untouched in a drawer for generations. Its original luster still dances beneath a low-angle light. The details remain remarkably sharp. The difference is extraordinary. That is why collectors pay close attention to certified grades such as MS65, MS66, MS67, and the exceptionally difficult MS68. Those grades represent far more than numbers. They tell the story of survival. Historical auction records suggest premium certified examples often receive substantially greater collector interest than ordinary circulated pieces. Documented sales have shown that originality, eye appeal, and preservation consistently influence demand among advanced collectors. Values fluctuate with market conditions. No honest expert guarantees future prices. Professional certification is required before any value can be assigned. That sentence remains one of the most important lessons in coin collecting. If you believe your 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny deserves closer examination, do not clean it. Not ever. Cleaning removes the original surfaces professional graders expect to see. Fine hairline scratches created during cleaning may be almost invisible to the naked eye, yet they become immediately obvious under proper lighting and magnification. Once originality disappears, it never returns. Leave the coin exactly as you found it. If it appears exceptional because of its condition, an unusual mint error, or a suspected variety, professional authentication through PCGS or NGC provides the strongest foundation for determining its significance. Raw, ungraded coins carry no reliable premium based only on hopeful assumptions. Evidence always comes first. That principle protects the hobby. It protects collectors. And it protects history itself. The 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny represents something larger than its face value. It represents the beginning of peace. Factories changing their purpose. Families rebuilding their lives. Children growing up in neighborhoods filled with optimism instead of uncertainty. Every penny quietly traveled through that changing America. Perhaps one helped pay for a movie ticket on a warm summer evening. Perhaps another crossed the counter of a small-town diner where veterans shared stories that would never appear in history books. Perhaps another rested for decades inside a forgotten cigar box until someone curious enough finally opened it. Coins remember. Not through words. Through survival. Margaret looked across the 4 wheat pennies resting on the old wooden table. The wartime 1944 D. The confident 1952 D. The legendary 1955 Philadelphia cent. The hopeful 1946 Philadelphia issue. Each looked small. Each looked ordinary. Yet together they told a story stretching across one of the most remarkable periods in American history. She gently closed the album. Then she noticed something tucked beneath its final page. A faded envelope. Inside it was a handwritten note from her grandfather. It contained only one sentence. The most valuable coin is usually the one everyone else overlooks. She smiled. Because after everything she had learned, she finally understood exactly what he meant. And perhaps tonight, somewhere in an old jar, a forgotten drawer, or a family collection, another Lincoln Wheat Penny is waiting for someone willing to look just a little closer. The hunt is never really about finding treasure. It is about discovering the stories that ordinary people unknowingly carried in their pockets, one penny at a time.